Welcome to On Character Development, part one of two separate lectures for creative writing and intro to creative writing students. There are two schools of thought on novel writing. One is character-driven and the other is plot-driven. And I really want to make clear neither is more correct or better. It has to do with the way you write and the things that appeal to you as a writer. A character-driven writer must know their character first, and the story evolves from that character. And I am very much this type of writer. Until I know my character, I cannot start writing. A plot-driven writer knows the story, and the character manifests out of the plot. So while we're starting the discussion about character development in fiction, there's nothing wrong with knowing your story first and your character second. The goal with character development, whether you start with story or character, is to form an emotional connection to those characters. So what I want you to do now is to think about a time that you've read a book that made you cry. And while we're working, or while I'm discussing this, I want you to list some books that made you cry. And if you're in one of my online classes, go ahead and list those in the chat area. A key thing to think about when you think about crying for a character or a book is that you're really crying because of the character that you love. So you're responding to character and not story. Conversely, also consider books that made you stay up all night to finish them. Most of us who are readers do that quite frequently. And so one of the things I want you to do is list the books, either brainstorming on your own or in the chat area, books that made you stay up all night. For me, an example of this was the last Hunger Games novel. And really, I was reading to find out who lived. I was tired of the love triangle and the betrayals, and I just wanted to know who lives. That was an example of my love for story. When we lose sleep or stay up all night for a book, it tends to be because we have found a story that we love. And whenever we cry or lose sleep for a character, it's because they have become real to us. One way to create authentic characters is to people watch. One thing that you can do to develop your characters is to listen in to conversation. Yes, it's politically incorrect. Yes, you should do it anyways. So think about places that you can do that. The gym, the bus, the airport, work, teenagers, older people, the mall. If you can't get out of the house, I'm recording this while we're in the social distancing of COVID-19. You can observe your family members. You're probably getting on your nerves, but you can go downstairs where they don't see you maybe and just quietly observe and listen. Writers practice being present, so wherever you are, you should be listening and watching and observing the people around you. So for this particular exercise, I want you to find or think of someone to observe, and you can do that in public places or you can do that online. So in public places, when I was young, I knew I was a writer from a very young age, and I was always observing people. And the first time I noticed myself being observed, I was riding the city bus, and there was a sketch artist on the bus, and I think he was there doing the same thing I was. He was observing people, and he was drawing pieces of the people on the bus. So not full sketches, but one of the things that he recorded, I had a small braid down the side, and he drew that and the bow that was attached to it. So that's what you're doing as a writer, is you're observing and noticing these little details. Other places sometimes are driving around. I can think of several times where I've stopped at a stoplight and found or watched the people next to me, and they're arguing. And so I used to do with my kids, I would say, what do you think they're arguing about? And we would create fictional scenes about what these people were arguing about. Were they siblings, a married couple, Two strangers, school people, work people, what were they fighting about? Those are the kind of questions you should constantly be asking yourself. If you don't have access to other people, and that's possible in our current experience, you can go to something like Pinterest and find a picture of a character that you would like to think about. Observe your character that you're creating and notice if you're watching them in public. What are their tics, mannerisms, and speech patterns? Their clothes, their shoes, their coat, or lack of a coat. Notice their socioeconomic level, their eye color, skin color, wedding rings, tan lines. Any piece of their person that's observable, you should note. And then make sure that you give your character a name, goals, habits, and flaws. You don't need to fill out a form for the character to come to life, but you do need to know the character well enough for your reader to relate to them emotionally and commit to going on the ride with them. Think about those books that you cried over. That's how much you want your reader to connect with your characters. You're creating an authentic person who behaves in a consistent or consistently inconsistent way. And this is particularly important when you have characters that you use in multiple stories. I have a character that's still one of my favorite. I wrote it in 2015. And I've written 3 or 4 books since then, but he's still my all-time favorite character. And he started as a minor character who was a bouncer in a bar, who was a big guy. I think I said he was as big as a mountain. He looked like a dumb jock from the outside. So that was his physicality. But then when I started thinking of his habits and his flaws and his goals, I found out more about him. He's loyal, he's committed to a cause, he's riddled with guilt over his brother's death, and he's seeking revenge. So once you start to know your character that well, you're building someone that your readers can love. So you can brainstorm your characters. You don't have to fill out the form, like I said, although I'll post in a moment here some links for you. Writer's Digest has several forms that you can use in the character and story development stage, and so I'll list that link for you. But what you're really doing is imagining a life for the person that you've developed as a fictional character. And so I have a prompt at the end that will work on practicing that. And to get there, you need to figure out, what would my character do? In any given situation, characters like people behave in a certain way. They follow existing patterns and habits and behaviors. They need to act consistently or unless or until they learn a new behavior, like a character on a quest who learns to cast spells or vanquish monsters. So as you're starting your character development, think about their patterns and habits of behavior. An example would be a people pleaser character. A people pleaser should stay consistent. So a people pleaser is not going to run the resistance unless the people pleaser persona is a disguise. Readers tend to get ticked off when your character acts out of type. So I have a character that I'm working on for a novel now, and she has PTSD. She's not a very touchy-feely person, and if someone tries to touch her, or if she were to reach out to touch someone else, it feels false to the reader, and the reader will revolt. And that doesn't have to be outright anger. It just has sometimes just a matter of them putting the novel aside. Characters cause emotional reactions in your readers. They will cry if you create an authentic character who is in a serious mess. All right, so this is I always have some sort of disclaimer, and the first one is that as a story creator, you need to know this information to create a flesh and blood character. Your reader does not need to know all the details that you know. So don't front end all this information into your first chapter. It's called an info dump. And when you do that, you're giving the reader information that's boring. You want to start with an active scene, so the reader doesn't care yet. Save that information until your reader cares. All right, so first I'm going to give you a prompt, and then for those of you who are in my online class, we're going to build a character together. But I want to give you the prompt first, and then we'll go into the assignment. So first, choose a person that you know well and write 10 true statements about him or her. Once you've written those 10 statements, write down the opposite of each one of those things. So if you are following along just in video, you can pause the video after each one of these steps and push play once you've finished those elements. Those of you in class, you can do this for the assignment that's due next. Once you have the opposite list, this is what describes your main character for the rest of this exercise. How would this character deal with one of these fictional experiences that follow? Remember, they are the opposite of someone you know, so you can use that person and think about how they would respond to the situation, and then have your character do the opposite. 3 opportunities. Your character is walking down a busy street and suddenly goes blind. What does this mean to them? What does he or she do next? Who is your character? Option 2. Your character's sibling tells them in a restaurant that they are going to marry or move in with someone your character has doubts about, for reasons the siblings won't understand at all. What happens next? Option 3. Your character pretends to be someone else for a job interview or blind date. Remember, this is opposite of someone you know. For this prompt, write 300 or more words written in a scene form with the dialogue, interior thoughts, setting details, descriptions. It should have 2 or more characters, so your main character has someone to interact with, and at least 5 things on your opposite list should turn up in that scene. That's your prompt for today. Now, let's talk about what we're going to do in class. I chose a name, or I got a list of names from Random Name Generator. If you struggle with naming your characters, this is a great, easy tool to use. So we're going to look at this list as a class and choose one of these names. If you are not in my online class, pick a name and do the things that I'm about to recommend. So after you've chosen one of the 10 names, consider, what does this person look like? Does the character name impact the way you perceive their appearance? How old are they? What job do they have? What problems? Consider their deepest desire and their surface desire. For instance, somebody could have a deep desire of connecting with somebody and creating a found family, but their surface desire is to make money. So how are those in opposition or connected to one another? What obstacles do they face? What situation will make this character leave his ordinary world to go on whatever adventure you have planned? For my online students, you can create a character sketch just by answering those questions. We're going to do this in a moment in our chat. However, there is a link here to Writer's Digest. Writer's Digest has all of the forms from Book in a Month by Victoria Lynn Schmidt online, free for download. And there's some great forms in there, including a character sketch form. So that's your worksheet potential. All right, friends, that's the end of the lecture today. We're going to work on the group activities. If you're not in class and you're only watching the video, do these exercises on your own until we get to character development 2.